see what I'm saying there? We're just looking at it from completely different perspectives. They aren't self-proclaiming. They don't jump up and say, this is exactly how we died. This is exactly what caused it. But whenever I look at it, for instance, you brought up the situation with the entire Earth at one, I guess every place on the Earth at one point or another being 50 degrees. And we can know that pretty surely. That doesn't mean it was 50 degrees all over the place. Right. I think that's an extremely detailed example when, in fact, the Earth being covered with water would be a much broader picture than 50 degrees, you know what I'm saying? But if the Bible...
I actually don't see what you're saying. I think my analogy is almost perfect.
Okay, well, if the Bible says the Earth was covered by water, the entire thing, then I can say, well, I'm going to expect to see some stratification all over the entire Earth. Now, would that be logical, according to you?
I have no idea what would happen if the entire Earth were flooded. I mean,
well, you can look at if a valley is flooded, or if some large, what was there? There was a canyon that was flooded and ran through up in Georgia, I believe. I can't even think of it. Whatever. They had sedimentation. They had they had a completely losing my words here.
Stratification.
Stratification, yeah. They had different layers right there. They had lamina form and so forth. And so we can see this happens on a small scale, which is your guys' whole argument with micro-macro evolution. We see it happening on a small scale, now pictured on the big scale. Exactly? So if we see these floods on a small scale, and they make strata, they make layers, then it's safe to assume that they would do that on a big scale, right?
It might be, but when you look at the details, it starts to break down, because you have things like unconformity, I believe it's called in geology, where the layers poke up at angles
that
and become broken, right?
Yeah.
And then you have more layers form on top of those. It doesn't look characteristic of a global phenomenon.
Well, then you're counting out recessiveness of this flood, because we know that if there are upheavals, there are things being pushed up, the activity is not going to be, isotropic all over the entire Earth. It's not going to be the same thing everywhere all the time. And there are, flood models given. I believe Baumgartner generated who's actually our leading geologist, computer modeler, model a flood for the flood, or created a model for the young Earth flood. And so there are actually studies doing in this. And there are very credible, scientists who publish in peer-reviewed journals, secular peer-reviewed journals, because I know there's a whole contention, is a Christian journal peer-reviewed, technically, according to the secularists. There are people who still believe that the Earth is 6,000 years old, and the geological evidence points to a recent, global deluge.
Well, let's distinguish two things here, if I may. I would say that there's a difference between a model fitting the data and someone with an open mind coming to the table and predicting that that's the way that it happened.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the Genesis hypothesis, so to speak, or the flood hypothesis, is something that we can consider scientifically, right? And then whether the models of it that are proposed fit the data is a different question. What I would contend is that a kid that doesn't know anything about any of this debate, who doesn't believe in God, because all children are born atheists, they're not going to go and see that. That was kind
of just real quick, that's kind of a slap and run. All children are born atheists.
No, it's just a fact. They're not born believing in God, therefore they're atheists.
Okay. I don't know if you read the story of Helen. You know who Helen Keller is, right?
I did 2 biographies, book reports on her as a kid, actually. Yeah.
Great. Well, then there was one that I was reading on her. I don't know if it was the one that you wrote, but there was one that I read on her where she actually believed in God without having anybody tell her. And it was when a priest came to speak with her that she was all excited when he told her about God. Now, nobody could really communicate, hey, there's a guy up there looking down on us, or there's a guy everywhere looking at us. No one can.
Yeah, in some sense I would agree with this, because I would say that humans seem to have a predisposition towards believing in
eventually it comes
forces.
in. Okay,
Okay, but what I mean by this is
it's
let's
a
be more
moot point.
specific.
Do you want to? Yeah, what were you going on before that? Instead of
what I'm trying to get at is a kid is not born knowing about the Noah's Ark story.
Uh-huh.
That's something that they had to be told and indoctrinated with in Sunday school.
Just like evolution.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Neither of these are things that people see, like, immediately. It's not obvious either way.
I agree.
Okay. So what I'm saying is somebody who doesn't know anything about either side, an unbiased person who looks at the explanation given by Christians and young Earth creationists and the explanation given by evolutionary biologists, I would say they're going to go with the evolutionary biologists.
I would say it would split.
I don't think that it splits. Because
of course, there's no influences whatsoever. People are going to have extra influences that may not even be completely relevant to it. For instance, just like Dr. Hovind says many times, if some people do have perversion in their life, no, they're not going to like the idea of a Christian God. They're not going to like that. So that will influence them, whether or not they've been told about evolution or not. If someone says, hey, you can do this, it's justifiable, you don't have to feel bad because everyone says you're wrong because, who cares what they say? It's justifiable scientifically. If someone says that, yes, that's going to be an influence on them. If somebody... What's that? Go ahead.
Here's where the blurring comes in, though, because as I've pointed out, there are Christians who believe in evolution. It's not
I agree.
Separation like that.
I agree. Well, what you're doing here, you're getting, I guess, the fallacy of a verified prediction. Just because someone believes in evolution, and many people do, many Christians do, does not mean they're immoral. I don't know any evolutionists. I would never say anyone's immoral just because they're an evolutionist. I would never do that.
Ken Hovind seems to think that.
Well, he doesn't say they're immoral. He says, there's probably some reason why, they picked that path.
He makes the case on seminar video number 5, I believe, that evolution is responsible for these, school shootings and things
I would
like
say
that.
Evolution justifies them.
Religion justifies all kinds of violence, I would say, far more than anything you could make the case for evolution.
Well, if religion we'd have to look at that. For instance, evolution says there's really no purpose for us being here. Actually,
that is not necessarily true.
Hold on a second. In, I believe, November of last year, Scientific American, by an article written by Karen Hopkin, I believe. No, she's an author for The Scientist. Who cares? There was an article in Scientific American. It was a special edition on why we age. And it said the sole purpose of our existence is to pass on genes. Once we've done that, we are wasting space and only mooching off our offspring.
This is, sort of Dawkins-like.
It was, kind of not exactly verbatim, but that's the gist of it, and I'll stand by that. And so
have you ever heard of Dawkins' book called The Selfish Gene?
Oh, yeah, I've read parts of it.
That's sort of what that is.
And, Dawkins is a character of his own.
Oh, yeah.
But, nice guy, I'm sure. I don't know. Never talked to him in person.
He's a bulldog for evolution.
Okay, but anyway, let's see, what was it? Yeah. So evolution may not come out and say, hey, there's no purpose to life. Do what you want. It doesn't have to say that to say it. Many people can say things without actually verbally saying it. There's body language and stuff like that. If I'm driving down the road and I call Jared up on the phone and say, dude, I'm out of gas, it would be correct for you to get the gist of it that I'm probably stopped somewhere on the side of the road with my car parked, turned off.
Uh-huh.
I never said that. I just said I'm out of gas.
Yeah.
Evolution doesn't have to say there's no purpose to life for it to say there's no purpose to life.
Yeah, I understand your point, and your point is fairly well taken, but what I would contend, again, is that there are plenty of Christians that totally disagree with that.
That's fine. There are still many evolutionists who would disagree with many things you say. That's completely irrelevant. You're asking my opinion. I'm giving it to you.
No, I don't think it's irrelevant, because you're talking about something social here. You're talking about, what things lead people to believe other things.
The traditional view of evolution... No, I'm not saying evolution leads people to believe that. I'm just saying it justifies a belief they may have.
See, here's the thing, and this is something that Shermer said that I think is very good. He said, smart people are very good at rationalizing the things they came to believe for non-smart reasons.
You just made me look like a monkey doing a math problem. What exactly did you say again?
Okay.
Smart people what?
Smart people are very good at rationalizing the things they came to believe for non-smart reasons.
Okay.
So what that means is that a person's convictions can be so powerful that their intellect can wrap around it and protect it like a shell against any kind of argument, right?
I agree.
And I think that's what's happening with me and Ken Hovind. I think that Ken Hovind is a smart guy, but I think that he's blinded by his faith.
I would say the same thing for many evolutionists.
See, that might be true for some evolutionists. It's not true in my case. I am extremely critical of the evolutionary theory. If you talk to somebody like Martin who calls in, I talk to him all the time.
From Sweden?
If you ask him what my attitude toward evolution is, he'll tell you that I'm a skeptic.
That's great. Well, then we're actually, brothers in arms here, because I'm a subscriber to Scientific American. I get practically every issue of Skeptic. I read my Bible skeptically because I want to sharpen myself. What kind of, and I'm going to be just blunt here, what kind of Christian expects to be, or even what kind of evolutionist expects to be effective if they don't argue against themselves at times?